It's good to watch TV, am I right? Well, TV shows to be specific, and that is the topic for today's video. I'm going to be ranking some of the popular shows by top 6. Well, to be clear, I am talking about the live-action related shows, so sadly, anime is not included. Well, unless you want me to talk about animated shows another time, if I hit 44 subscribers, or 50 to be exact. But as for now, we're just talking about the live-action related shows. Well, I did this ranking before, when I just had my old channel, and well, sadly, this ranking would not go the same way as last time. Because as you see, there are some shows that I used to be a big fan of, but then until I have experienced their disappointing recent seasons, so that means that the Squid Game series would not make it to the best list, unfortunately, due to its impact with a pretty okay third season. Yeah, I know, it's disappointing for me too. Well, before we begin, I want you to know that this listing is my opinion only, so not everyone would have to like the same thing. But with that being said, these are top 6 of my personal favorite shows to watch, starting right now. Stranger Things. Well, for those who have seen this show, you probably saw this coming. In fact, this is the show that I have no interest of checking it out, well, until someone in my family recommended it to me, and well, I gotta say, the story was wonderful. The characters were so fun to follow through, and it has a lot of good character arcs. The horror elements and action are good, and on that note, that someone was right about recommending this show to me in the first place. Alright, you guys are probably going to be asking, oh, Isaiah, how come Stranger Things is not much higher on the list? Well, Stranger Things didn't end up higher of the best list because of 2 things I had issues with, and that is the pacing and the climax. Well, to start off with the pacing, yeah, well, the pacing was very lacking, and I totally felt it in the early season, and then the pacing just got a lot slower in the 4th season and upwards, and there's a really offensive scene in Stranger Things Season 2 where Dustin Cat got eaten alive, and I hate that so much. I mean, just imagine if it was your pet animal just died. Yeah, this is exactly why I am not a fan of animals getting hurt. Well, especially it is my favorite animal, which is cats, and I cared about cats. I mean, seriously, whoever come up with Dustin Cat getting eaten alive by a Demogorgon, they should go to hell for that, for this kind of writing. Well, as for the final battle, well, I thought it was very anticlimactic to me. Vecna just got beaten pretty easily, and I was so shocked how quick and generic that climax was, and they were able to capitate him pretty quickly too. Vecna is supposed to be much stronger than before, but yet, for some reason, this show has completely wasted him at the end. That proved that Season 4 did better with their climax. It was slow, Vecna was harder to take out, and it has emotional weight to the final battle. So this could have been more appropriate for the final season of all season. and I thought it was too violent for a TV-14 show. I mean, for a series that is meant for teenagers and kids, it had some R-rated level violent. I mean, come on now. But overall, despite my criticism, Stranger Things was a pretty great show with a perfect ending to wrap up the whole entire series. Let's just forget that the animated show didn't happen. But like I said, this show had made me stick with the story and characters through the first season to the last, but everything else is nowhere near perfect, and this is why Stranger Things will be taking the low spot of this list. The Teenage Freaking Bounty Hunters. Yeah, this is a no-brainer of why it made this list. The story was pretty unique and grounded, and I was in love with the main characters since the first episode of this series, and that was a good start. Well, the Bounty Hunter sisters, Sterling and Blair, had such a hilarious personality. Well, they're sometimes annoying, but they're likeable nonetheless. And plus, they made the Bounty Hunter sisters act like actual siblings. That reminded me of me and my brother as kids. So I saw them as relatable characters in this sibling segment, and I also enjoyed their dynamic interaction with Bowser and the other characters in the show universe. Well, although some of the characters can just act unrealistically like it's a parody, but for a campy show like that, I'm just gonna let that slide. Well, although I had some two problems with TBH, and that is the subplot of how Sterling and April rivalry was handled. Like, they could have just easily made April the ultimate mortal enemy for these two young mercenaries, bounty hunters, but instead, they just somehow delayed this kind of rivalry and forced them to be lesbian couples. Alright, well, if Sterling wants to be gay, then I will say she can like whoever she wants, but it was mostly the writing that we should blame, and this is something what Sony Pictures should do to compromise this kind of subplot. And the other problem is that the overall story was just half of a story that is unresolved, because, well, if you haven't heard the news, the Teenage Bounty Hunters just got cancelled after one season because not many people know this series existed, and that is wild because the first season ended with a shocking cliffhanger too. Like, that cliffhanger was about that Sterling and Blair found out that they are not actual sisters, they're just cousins. Well, I have seen a lot of reactions about this show, and even that cliffhanger impacted some people that wanted more. Well, right now, it is 6 years since this show has been cancelled, but yet Netflix still haven't decided to revive this show, and that is such a shame because Lou Assassin is another Netflix show that just cancelled after one season, but they decided to continue the story by making a 1-hour movie special called The Fistful of Vengeance, and I wonder why Netflix did not do the same with the Teenage Bounty Hunters. They at least deserve to have their story be continued. Like, Netflix could have had an open mind and make a 1-hour movie special of the Teenage Bounty Hunter to conclude the story. But you know what? Whatever. Well, unlike Netflix, if I ever gain the rights, I might have some plans for them. Well, despite the Teenage Bounty Hunters not getting a second season, I still care for it. in flaws and all, and I did had a lot of fun when I first watched this show back in 2021, and it does felt like a comic book kind of story. Well, even though the Teenage Bounty Hunters is not based off the comics, and this is why this show earns this spot on my best list. The Daredevil. Well, speaking of comic book story, I just recently finished watching the whole series of Daredevil. Well, including the MCU rebooted version. Well, while Born Again was nothing really special compared to the Netflix version, it still had that feel. Overall, they made Matt Murdock a great character. The series was dark, gritty, brutally violent. It has a lot of expense going on, and the fight scenes were unbelievably executed. Well, the only problem is that the pacing can get too slow in each 50 minutes episode I have seen. But on that note, Daredevil was one serious comic book show with a flawless story and characters, and that what makes it highly recommended to me. Stargirl. Alright, I feel like you guys are not going to agree with me, but I don't care. Stargirl was very underrated. The origin story was great. The emotional core hits the home run the most. The characters were entertaining, well, especially a group of superheroes, and the action were also great, and it gets better and better throughout the episode and seasons, and they end this series on a pretty good note for the final season too. Well, ever since I have seen this show, I started to get into Stargirl. I had both of her comic books, and that's how much the Stargirl character impacted me, because this show took its time to make me understand her and the bond she built with her family and friends, well, especially her enemies too, because even most of the villains in this series can get redemption arcs. Well, overall, I loved Stargirl. It is my favorite comic book shows, and it is the best CW DC shows, in my opinion. And I am dying for James Gunn to make a Stargirl movie, or the Justice Society movie he would probably make. I mean, Stargirl is part of the Justice Society. So yeah, Stargirl is such an amazing show, and I couldn't recommend it enough. Atypical. This is one of my favorites for a reason, and it's the fact that this show is about a boy who has autism, and well, guess what? Me, myself, also have autism, so your boy had some disability. Well, not only it is cool to watch a show where I can relate to the main character, I can also relate to his whole entire life. Me and Sam were the same, well, but different. Well, he had a younger sister that gets his driver license before he does, and I also had a younger brother who can drive before I can even drive. We were both single and wanted to have a girlfriend, well, except he ends up getting a girlfriend at the end, unlike me. Well, he wants to travel to the Atlantic or wherever to see the penguins. Well, me, I just want to be a film director. So yeah, despite the both of us having completely different story, we're kind of the same at times. Well, although I do not like the gay romantic stuff that they keep doing between the sister and the other girl. But with that being said, I had a blast going through Sam's journey. Well, it's not rewatchable, but it had some heart. And this is why Atypical is my favorite show. Well, at least my second favorite. My number one favorite is...
Cobra Kai! 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 Cobra Kai!
Yeah, that's damn right, everyone. Cobra Kai is number one of this list, the baddest show of them all. And I'm going to explain why is that. Well, because Cobra Kai is just a continuation of the Karate Kid movies, it just felt like a event that we didn't know we needed. Well, the story is simple at best, but most of the characters in this show were great. The fight scenes were awesome, and there's a lot of emotional redemption and drama. And it was an overall full circle conclusion. Well, although I found season 6 of Cobra Kai to be the weakest of all the other seasons because the story doesn't make sense in that season and some subplots are being forced, and there's a moment where some of these characters just go out of character. So much so, it felt like that Sony Pictures had completely taken over this show, and the Karate Kid franchise is owned by Sony Pictures, so it kind of made sense why it felt that way. But season 6 did got better when the show started making up for it in the final episode, and Cobra Kai did had a perfect ending nonetheless, but the ending could have been more satisfying if Netflix made sure that Sony Pictures doesn't compromise it a long time ago. But despite the underwhelming final season, Cobra Kai was really awesome. It was a great thing that we gotten from the Karate Kid franchise. Well, in fact, this show was the reason why I started doing Taekwondo in the first place. Well, I know it is not everyone's number one pick for best shows, but hey, Cobra Kai is just a show that I was entertained the most. Well, because of season 6, this series is not that perfect, but to me, Cobra Kai is the best show I ever seen in my life. And that's how it earns the number one spot of the best list. And that was it for this list. These are the 6 shows I liked the best. Oh, and you should also watch the show Kickin' It. It's also a really good one. If you enjoyed that ranking video, make sure to like and subscribe to my channel, and comment down below and tell me what is your own favorite shows, ranking from top 6. My name is Isaiah Belfort, and I will see you guys next time.